This film is an open submission to those who are developing a new national drug strategy for Ireland. It's been made by myself, Chris Maguire, and John Bissett in collaboration with the community reps on the Canal community's local drugs task force. We've also put this film up on YouTube so that anybody interested can view it there. For 12 years now, myself and John have been working with community reps in this corner of the southwest inner city of Dublin. Initially, we worked on arts-based projects in order to bring to light something of their knowledge and insight into the impact of hard drug use across our communities. In 2008, we mounted an exhibition of this work under the title Awakenings, which was seen at venues in Bluebell, Inchicore and Rialto. And for me, this multimedia exhibition told us two things. Firstly, that people who do not usually see themselves as artists are capable of making good quality artwork when they are supported and are addressing issues that they are familiar with and passionate about. Secondly, that the issues addressed in that exhibition were diverse and indicated that we needed to take a broad-based approach when trying to understand the complex set of circumstances that led people into hard drug use. Soon after the Awakenings exhibition, we saw the global economic crisis emerge, with devastating implications for Ireland. Since then, there has been massive cutbacks in public spending in this country, and the community sector in particular has been disproportionately negatively affected. Over the last 8 years, we have continued with the work locally, mostly without funding, and while we have not had the opportunity to do elaborate arts-based work, nevertheless, we have witnessed a growing understanding and valuing of the place of creative thinking and action within the regular work of community-based workers and volunteers in exceptionally hard circumstances. So we would like you to listen to the voices of these people now, and hopefully you will also see something of this implicit, creative and alive set of responses to the ongoing impact of drug use within the geography of the southwest inner city of Dublin, in the sure and certain knowledge that our reality is very similar to that of many other disadvantaged communities across the city and across the country at this time. If you can see and hear all of this, I am confident of one thing. You will see that the input of communities most affected by the ongoing drugs crisis within our society needs to be considered as central to the set of responses that will emerge in a new national plan. Over these last 12 years, the composition of the community reps cohort locally has changed, yet some of the faces remain the same. One of these is Eilish Comerford. She participated in the Awakenings project in 2008, showing photographs of the living conditions in the then last remaining tower block on St Michael's Estate. And in an accompanying text piece, she vowed never to get used to or accept these living conditions as normal for anyone in our society. In this film, we will start with an interview with Eilish, and I'll ask her what happened since in Inchicore, where she continues to work today.
I think what happened here is very symbolic to the start of the recession, because you think of it, a developer, Bernard McNamara, who had a lot of big developer, he had obviously overextended himself by taking on our project and 4 others in the city of Dublin, and then didn't have the money, couldn't get the cash to deliver it either, and he had to be pulled out of the 5, leaving us high and dry. And when you think back at that time, a lot of developers obviously began to overextend themselves, and we've all found out much later what had happened, that they got too much credit, couldn't meet their bills, couldn't get any more credit, and the banks collapsed. So I think our story, what happened here, very much was the first major warning signs of what was yet to come. So then we fought for a plan, and then we were lucky to get funding then for 2 acres of the next phase, which is called Thornton Heights. We've secured money from the government to construct and to build that, And that did happen, and thankfully that was started in 2010 and it was completed in last year. And residents moved in there last August. And that development, well, it's small, it's hugely significant because it's, at a time when nothing was being built in the country in terms of social housing, that was built and completed. But that came from the doggedness and persistence of people here, because we felt you have to fulfil your promise. And we kept on challenging the government, and thankfully, as a result, some people have got new homes that were living in difficult situations, or they were in private rented, and they've gotten state-of-the-art homes over in Thornton Heights, well insulated. It cost people very little to heat their homes, and very spacious, and the homes was also quite furnished with washing machines and stuff like that, that enable people to live and have a comfortable life very, very quickly in their new environment. So and there's also a state-of-the-art creche, childcare centre and creche there as well, which is fantastic, and it serves that little neighbourhood and the wider Inchicore neighbourhood as well.
Well, it started for me, I suppose I'd have to say it started for me in December of '91, when I first came home from England. I came out of the army in England in December of '91, and I had been to Kuwait in the Middle East with the coalition forces, and my time was due up in the army. I was asked to re-enlist, but after being to Kuwait I didn't feel I could, and I came home. I swore I'd never live again, but I had a hard time fitting back into society as just a civilian. So I ended up dabbling with things. I couldn't sleep, and then I ended up dabbling with drugs myself. And you know, it was, in a way, at first it was to take things off my mind that were on it, and in the end it just became a problem, and then it just made life even worse for me. So I saw treatment for that, and when I got the treatment for it and got sorted out, I decided that I would like to work with people that are in the same predicament and haven't yet, you know, transferred to the next step, and maybe I could help them with that, you know. So I got involved with the Service Users Forum on the Canal's community's local drug task force. You know, and without people on the drugs task force to get initiatives going for rehabilitation and, you know, programs and aftercare programs and stuff like that, people wouldn't, you know, they'd be looking into a dark hole thinking, how am I ever going to get out of this, you know? But where the drugs task force comes in, they say, look, you need to make the step to come to us, but then once you do that, we can help you, you know. So I find it very good, you know, and I do a lot of work with the community reps as well, and I find that's very rewarding work, you know. For me it's very rewarding, you know. I enjoy that work very much, actually. That's one of my favourite parts of the work I do, is the community rep work. But I really do enjoy the service user work as well, because I feel that I'm giving back to someone. You know, when I tell someone how I achieved my goals, you know, and then try and help them to achieve theirs, I feel that I'm giving back a lot, you know, and that makes me feel good, you know. It makes me feel empowered, so to speak.
The approach was fairly open-ended, and like for a while that wasn't really clear about what the substance of the film was, and myself and Chris would have conversations, and eventually in mid 2016 for me a couple of key themes became clear, and one of the key themes in the film is the idea of place or space within the Canal communities, as it's known, that people occupy, and probably within that area as well the public housing estates or places within the area, their history, their development, their demise, their change, and struggles over space, actually, about what they're like, what they become, how people understand them. So this theme of place, space, space is classed in that sense, and the French philosopher Henri Lefebvre talks about space in terms of that space is conceived, that it's brought into being from something that it wasn't. It's perceived in that we make representations of space. In the past they would have been paintings or images, whereas today they're more likely to be media reports. But space is also lived in, and people have specific experiences within space, culturally, socially, physically, economically, over a period of time. Like in the context of the Drugs Task Force, this is the place where drug use takes place, actually. But we don't, like a lot of the time we think of the individual in a psychological manner or even in a social manner, but we tend not to connect the kind of physical geography or landscape with that. But places have a much deeper substantive history which sits beneath all of that, that quite rarely gets written, spoken, talked about, or gets an airing in that way, in any meaningful sense.
At the time of the economic collapse, we were really at a point in the regeneration where the physical regeneration, if you like, the houses had been built and the community centre had been built, and there was great hope and looking forward and the feeling that there would be jobs for the young people. More and more young people were going into third level education, more and more people had hopes for the future, and the feeling is that people would be working, and it was onwards and upwards. And I think with the economic collapse, if you like, all those possibilities, if you like, the surrounding infrastructure has disappeared. And I think that really all of this has had a major impact on drug use in this community. And I know Fatima has always been associated with drug use, but when you don't have an economic path to go, like a job, for young people, and there's possibilities of earning money on the streets, it's quite easy to get linked into the whole gang and the drug industry. And it saddens me to see young people that I would have worked with in the past actually out on the streets, and that seems to be their only alternative. And I do think that as a community organisation here, we, I suppose, are trying to be as creative as possible to engage with the whole community and move it along, but you can only do so much when you're battling against austerity and cutbacks. I suppose I think that often when the government think of tackling drug use in communities, they think very much on an individual basis, and they think of treatment and rehab. I think they are very, very important to an individual solution to somebody's drug problem. However, when it's affecting a whole community, I think if you don't have if a community response to drug use and support, where people feel hope, they feel opportunities. At the height of our regeneration here in Fatima, there was massive hope. There was massive feeling, yes, the young people can go out, they can get jobs, they can do anything, they can go to college. and that has been taken away. So if we don't have community as central to the drug strategy, a national drug strategy, I think the government are missing the point.
Within the work of the community representatives on the local drugs task force, as probably the major issue in the last few years has been that community should be central to any new both local and especially a national drug strategy, that idea. And in the short film what we're actually doing is going physically into those communities, for instance like Dolphin House, which is just beginning on the initial stages of a regeneration journey. It's a flat complex that has lived the heroin epidemic, has lived the drugs crisis for the last 30 years more, and it's got a little bit of hope now.
I'm a resident of the Dolphin Park, which is the senior citizen part of the Dolphin House complex. And I moved in about 8 years ago, and I decided, partly because I'm a Sinn Féin activist, and I thought it was in line with that I should be making an input into the community. I should be helping in whatever way I could. So I started to attend the meetings and trying to organise how do we get out of this terrible situation that the community is in. Of course, like when you take the circumstances that would encourage drug use, there are the circumstances of a community with no hope, with rundown living accommodation, poor facilities, and all these things are happening to us at this time, and as I say, largely as a result of government policy, but also as a result of the inertia caused by saying that's not a priority. So yes, certainly the whole situation of petty crime, of antisocial behaviour and of drug taking thrives in a situation like this, and it's difficult to see how we can get on top of it until the situation changes. Well, we have been fighting back. A number of years ago, the Can brought in this idea of that we could fight back through the use of human rights, so that instead of going to the local estate manager and saying these conditions are terrible, we want them changed, where nothing would happen because the estate manager hadn't the power to do anything anyway. They weren't given the budget even if they wanted to do it. So we decided to target the people who held a responsibility. So we looked into who did hold the responsibility for the conditions, and we found that it went right up the line to government level, and that the government had actually derogated not only from the 1947 Convention on Human Rights, they derogated in the provision of adequate housing, but they also, I think it was 1990, or maybe a few years before it, they derogated from the European Convention on Human Rights, and these are on the section on social and economic rights. So what we did was we said, right, although they can say they have a sort of a get out because they have refused to meet the needs of the poorer people for housing, but what we have said effectively in this petition of complaint, which we made to the European Social and Economic Convention, was that you cannot realise the right to health, good health, if you're living in a damp house with sewerage and mould and all those problems. You cannot manage to give the children a proper education if, because they're living in those conditions, they're missing a lot of their school because their health is bad. And that's further increasing the cycle of poverty, the cycle of deprivation, and the cycle that leads to the conditions in which drugs become the only way out for a lot of people.
So just understanding the nature of the places we work in, we live in, how change happens within them, how the physical landscape changes, what that does for people. So for instance, if people get new housing, how it changes their lives. There is a good argument to be made that taking poor people from poor housing and putting poor people into new housing is not enough. It's not enough to do that, but it is a start, and it's a good start. But we need to push on from that and to give people the proper general conditions in which to live lives of flourishing. All of those things we need to balance up the swing. If we balance up the swing, we'll be going a really good way towards changing the conditions of people's lives and changing a lot of the hardship, the violence that goes with drug use in this area. So.
Bluebell, it's funny because I'm from Dolphin House, you know what I mean, and the flats, and there's flats in Bluebell, but Bluebell is what I found over the last 8 years working there now is that like it's like an island, it's cut off from, we say, Drimna and Ijakowi, the Nace Road, and then there's Ballyferma and the Kylmore Road, so it's like an island and in the middle of nowhere really, because, and actually that's the way it seems to be treated, because there's no doctor in Bluebell, you know, there's no supermarket in Bluebell, there's no nurse, chiropodist, dentist in Bluebell, you know, so you have to travel, you know, to these places to get the services and stuff like that, and there's sort of for me there was like, when I was you know, a few weeks and months into the place, it looked like that it was like just left to do its own thing, and that's sort of transferred down to, we do a lot of work with older men and sheltered housing in Bluebell. There's 40 odd very old sheltered housing units, and then there's about 20 new sheltered housing, maybe the last 10 years. But the work that's happening with the men in relation to addressing their alcohol issues has really affected very positive change with the men, but the ongoing the future for the men is not good. So for me, there's huge contributing factors to this. Like it's the men's history, right? It's poverty, it's class, it's where they've come from, and like, you know, I think C.W. Wright talks about men's private orbits, and we have 30 odd men in their private orbits, and you have to sort of, you know, go into their orbit and convince the men that there might be something for them, there could be something for them, and I think, like, it's not all bad news, Chris, to be fair, right? We have a brand new community centre in Bluebell, right? And we have a space in that, we have an office space in that, and the manager up there is an ex colleague of mine from down here. She's a brilliant woman, right? But unfortunately, the building, in my view, is there for profit. So like every single space that we use, we're charged for. I suppose, like, the government policy in relation to addressing in relation to supporting the community sector, they've introduced SICAP, Social Inclusion and Activation Programme, Community Activation Programme. It's putting the community sector out for tender, it's for sale, and it's not working. It can't work. Putting the community sector out for tender doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because because it's not a bottom-up approach. But for me, the people that are challenging policy and government in relation to how we should go about addressing inequality, these people are disappearing and they're being sucked out of this, and the cuts have got rid of loads of jobs. We've lost so many workers in the Canal's partnership over the years, so many brilliant workers that we just cut and gone. That piece is gone, that piece is gone. It's like slash and burn without any real discussion, negotiation about it, right? And that seems to be the ongoing mantra. I don't understand it. You know, I don't understand why someone doesn't say, why don't we ask the people on the ground what we should be doing, instead of continuing with this race to the bottom neoliberal agenda that actually is going to create more problems long term. But maybe it's because people in the communities like Dolphin and Fatima and Bluebell and Rialto and St. Michael's, and maybe they don't matter, right? Maybe that's it. The poor don't matter.
Okay, so you've seen the whole film now. We've looked at different parts of this area, from the new community building in Bluebell and general changes that are there, to the work that's happened in Inchicore, especially around Thornton Heights, and how important that is and how much work there still is to be done there. And also in Rialto, the different approaches here, for instance the new Fatima that Roisin talked about, and also in Dolphin House. And these are the epicentres of where the heroin epidemic began in this city. And they are still critical places where poly-drug use and problematic drug use is still a crisis for the communities that are here, and it presents itself in all sorts of ways. So, as was said in the film, one of the key messages that we would like to give is that it's a strange irony in a way that from the beginning of the local drugs task forces in the mid-90s, that community itself was never a pillar explicitly within a national drug strategy. It is and was an implicit foundation for the national drug strategies, but we think that actually is a mistake, and that it should be remedied and fixed, and that there should be a specific community pillar within the new national drug strategy, and it should have a series of actions to go with it, and it should also have a resource base and properly funded. Given everything that's happened in recent years, it's amazing the work that people have continued to do in that respect. So we would argue, and it was said in different places in the film, that community really needs to be central to the new national drug strategy in a formal, explicit sense, that needs to happen. People forget, I think, in 2016, that it was the energy and the actions of communities in the 1980s and into the 1990s that pressured the governments at that stage to respond to the drugs crisis. I think even people, sometimes some newer people in the field, don't even have any sense or knowledge of that history, but that's where they came from. The drugs task forces and the structures that we have today came from community pressure, community action, community engagement to say to the state something needs to be done about this issue. We still have today a significant crisis in relation to problematic drug use, and more it's become a poly-drug use issue, and we need to bring together and to garner all of the resources that we have to deal with that. And it is places and the people that live in them that are critical to that strategy. The idea that a medical model or a narrow treatment model will do it on its own is not, in our view, it will not deal with the problem in the fashion which it needs to be dealt with. A formally recognised community pillar, explicitly recognised should be in place within the new national drug strategy that will begin, for instance, from 2017 on. So go for it. Make it explicit that there will be a new community pillar in the new national drug strategy. That's the message from this film.